for those of you who are not familiar with NPCA, we were formed 3 years after the Park Service, so we're the advocacy arm for the national parks. We lobby for more money for the parks. We volunteer and work to get volunteers to the parks. We fight inappropriate encroachment on the parks, and we work on park boundary expansions. So we're kind of the loudmouth advocacy arm for the parks. Virginia is incredibly wealthy in national parks. This is the Colonial Parkway. Virginia has, I think, 22 national parks and battlefields. So Virginia is amazingly lucky in the amount of parks they have. This is Manassas National Battlefield Park. Here we have Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, Prince William Forest, and of course the Shenandoahs. Now, in the work that we have done, we know that people visit the parks, they love the parks, and we are always on Capitol Hill trying to convince Congress, because the parks are suffering from a tremendous backlog and a budget shortfall. So we're always out trying to ask for more money. And what we believe, we knew people visited the parks. We had hard figures of the millions of people who go to our national parks. But we also believe that national parks bring economic largesse to the communities where they are. But we couldn't just say that. We had to have some hard data. So we started doing a series of economic reports. And in 2006, we did a national economic report. We hired some economists to go out, and I have copies of the reports in the other room. And what we found was that the parks are huge economic drivers. Each year they support about $13 billion in local private sector activity. They support almost 270,000 private sector jobs. 9 out of 10 Americans have visited a park, and 6 out of 10 have visited a park in the last 2 years. There's also outdoor recreation. This is Virginia Parks. There's 21 areas in the park system, almost 23 million. I won't read all this to you, but you can see that people come, they visit, they spend money, they love their national parks. Outdoor recreation is becoming more and more important in our country. 1 out of 20 United States jobs are in the recreation economy. These are national figures. People hunt and fish and spend millions of dollars across the country. In Virginia, there's been a lot of polls. People like to be outdoors. They want to visit historic sites. They want to jog. They want to walk. They want to picnic. So there's a huge demand for outdoor recreation nationwide. In Virginia, wildlife watchers spend $960 million in the Commonwealth. And this is hunters, fishermen, and birders and other people who like to be outside hiking. So we know people go to the parks, they spend time, they spend money there. And so we decided to do the zero in. We had our national data. We wanted to zero in on some specific parks and say what's happening on a park-by-park level. So we've done 3 reports we call Making Connections. And we went to, the first one was Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania. The second one was Shenandoah. And this past Monday, we released our report on Colonial National Historical Battlefield. And we went to these parks to see who's visiting, how economically are the parks doing, what are the needs that they have, what are they providing to the community, what are some of the opportunities that they can have, not only at the parks, but the surrounding communities to expand on what they're doing, to bring more people in and to serve the needs of the public, and what are some of the threats to the parks. One big problem that we've seen is that over the years, the role of the national parks and state parks have expanded. Some parks have been established to preserve nature. Grand Canyon was set up to save the Grand Canyon. Other parks have been set up to preserve history. So Lincoln's Home in Illinois, they're saving a slice of history. But those primary went to one of the park visitor centers or went into the parks, and they spent $327 million. So the Historic Triangle is a huge economic driver for the area. It brings in all kinds of sales and good economics to the region. Most travelers who go there, they don't just stay at one site. They'll go for 3 hours to one site, then they'll visit another. They often spend 2 or more days in the area. So it's a tremendous resource. And people go and they stay and they visit, they spend a lot of money. Tourism in Virginia is an $18 billion a year industry. It's a huge industry. 4 out of 10 jobs in Virginia are tourism related. And Colonial Triangle, the top 25 attractions, Williamsburg is number 2, the Parkway, Jamestown, and Yorktown are all in the top 25. So we looked at all of the way the Historic Triangle brings in good economic growth for the area. We found out, what is still needed, what is missing, and what can help. And we found some threats to the area. I mean, what we found was parks, they increase the quality of life, they increase property values. More businesses will locate in national parks or in the area. And what's special to Virginia is a lot of retirees come here. A lot of people from the DC area who work in the DC area, they'll come here, they'll live here, they'll volunteer in the parks. The threats that we've seen is the huge development pressures in the area. And on this map, you can see the black, and this is just the Historic Triangle, is areas that have been developed prior to 1992. And it's hard to see the red, but there's been additional development from 92 to 2006. So the development pressure is huge. So we have all this development, and then we have more and more demand for outdoor recreation and open space. So how do we tackle those? How do we capitalize on the parks in Virginia? How do we give people what they want, still have a good, strong economy? And there's a few opportunities I want to talk about. I'll show this little map here. Here's some recreational opportunities, and we have camping, we have boating, we have wildlife. What we are looking for and what we think will help is to have the national parks, the state parks, and the private sector work together to capitalize on the needs. In Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, we found a huge need was campgrounds. If there's a we've been working with them on a gateway study to help them see how they should develop their community. And there's a lot of opportunity for private sector. There's a huge need for camping because in Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, people come, they go to the Chancellorsville Visitor Center, they drive past the Wilderness Battlefield because there's this one little sign on a very busy road that says Wilderness Battlefield, and then 2 minutes later there's another little sign that says you just passed the Wilderness Battlefield. There's no entrance, there's nothing to make you stop and see. And so there's what we're telling the parks to do, and we're working with the state and locals, is how can you capitalize on this tremendous asset you have at the national park to get people to stop, to get people to stay, to get people to spend time and money. In the Historic Triangle, the places that we think are opportunities are, Fort Monroe, which I've been working on for a long, long time. How many people are familiar with Fort Monroe? There is a peninsula near Norfolk that has been an Army base forever. I mean, they first built a fort in the early 1600s, and it's an amazing place. It is the largest star fort in the country, and it was built in the 1800s. There was another fort built in the 1600s that burned down. And it's an active, thriving microcosm of an Army base. There's thousands of people there. There's a school, and a PX, and a hotel. And because of base closures, Fort Monroe, it just shut its doors. They had their deactivation ceremony last Thursday. And the Commonwealth was left to say, what do we want to do with this area? And not only do you have the fort and all the buildings and all the history there, and the history is immense. And Harriet Tubman was the nurse there. it was under Union control. And one day, 3 enslaved Africans rode over to Fort Monroe and asked for asylum. And Benjamin Butler, the general there, said, feed them, I don't know what to do with them right now. The next day, their owner showed up from them, and this was from the part of Virginia who had seceded from the Union. I said, I want my property back. And he said, well, since you're now a foreign country, these guys are a contraband of war, and you don't get them back. Well, word got out pretty rapidly to the enslaved Africans in Virginia, and over 10,000 slaves went to what they call Freedom's Fortress and left and joined and became free. So we have the beginning of slavery at Fort Monroe. We have the ending of slavery at Fort Monroe. So the history is immense, very interesting. Edgar Allan Poe wrote Annabel Lee there. I mean, every time I go, I learn more. But what's also fascinating to me is the whole northern part. There's 2 miles of Chesapeake shoreline that has never been developed. Now, less than 2% of the bay shoreline is open to the public. I mean, when you look at that development map I showed earlier, I mean, it's very, very rare. So what NPCA and other groups did was fight to have a new national park established. And what we're hoping to have done is have the Northern Peninsula be the national park, and a good part of the fort will be the park. Tim Kaine, when he was governor, set up the Fort Monroe Authority, and Governor McDonald still has the Fort Monroe Authority. And what they are is they are the kind of economic overseers of the rest of the peninsula. There's over 200 buildings there, and Hampton is going to have to make that work economically. I mean, they're going to be responsible for fire and police, and so they're coming up with an economic plan where they can lease buildings. The National Trust and other historic groups are very involved to make sure that valuable old buildings are not destroyed, and NPCA is a stakeholder, a lot of groups are stakeholders. So this will be a partnership park, and that's really the way of the future. NPCA believes that the Park Service is already underfunded. New parks, which are tough to get, I mean, we had 393 for a long time. We just got a new one. We got the Martin Luther King Monument a couple of weeks ago, but we don't get new parks very often. And the way of the future is going to be partnership parks, where part of it is run by the National Parks Service, and parts of it are going to have to be turned over to business communities to make compatible economic development. And we have to be very careful to make sure that that development is done properly, that we're involved, and that natural resources or historic resources are not sacrificed. But the beauty of Fort Monroe is everybody in Virginia wants it. The Republican Governor McDonald is on board for wanting the park. The 2 senators, Jim Webb and Mark Warner, the 4 area congressmen, 3 of whom are Republican, have all been openly on record for wanting this to be a national park. The only way it will be a national park in this climate on Capitol Hill is for an Antiquities Act proclamation. And we feel like we're really close. With the latest rumor, and there's so many rumors, is that early October our president will act and we'll have a new park. I strongly urge anybody who hasn't been there. I've been there 5 or 6 times now, and I've only been on board since February. It's amazing, and there's a lot of birders here. The birding, I went with a young man we just hired as a birder, and we were constantly pulling over, and he's pulling out binoculars. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and it'll be a fabulous addition to the park system. But the way of the future is, and this is Dog Beach, which is part of Fort Monroe.
Just a quick question. You mentioned Antiquities Act. Does that allow parks to be created, or just?
It would be specifically it would be a national monument. And what the Antiquities Act would do is most of this property, the whole peninsula, almost most of the peninsula is federal property. And under the lease from the 1800s from between the Commonwealth of Virginia and the federal government when it became an army base, according to the lease, it would revert back to the Commonwealth. And what is happening right now is Governor McDonald had to write a series of letters to the federal government saying, we would like you to use the Antiquities Act to proclaim a national monument for this area of land, which would revert back to the Commonwealth. He's done that. He sent his letter on September 6th. Then the Department of Interior would act, and the proclamation would specifically be Dog Beach and the wild area on the northern part of the peninsula. And then the proclamation would instruct the Congress, working very closely with the Commonwealth, private sector and the state and local level. And again, Colonial is an excellent example because the Historic Triangle has what they created was the Historic Collaborative. 25 big business guys got together years ago and said, how are we going to market our tourism and market this amazing resource we have of these beautiful parks and battlefields to get people into our communities to spend the money and not sacrifice what we have. And so they do a lot of coordination. And right now it's the 150th anniversary of the Civil War, so you all are seeing a huge influx of tourists. Virginia has more Civil War battlefields than any other state in the country. And I don't know if anybody was at Manassas 150th. Did anybody go to the battlefield? I was there. It was like 200 degrees out, and there were 700 people. And they stayed, my husband went out a couple days later with his father, and they were still there, and they met somebody from Australia. I mean, people are coming, and so the communities need to look at some of these events and say, how can we shine a spotlight on what we have, and how can we convince Congress to fund them properly, and how can we work together? And the Historic Collaborative has done an excellent job with that. There's other anniversaries coming up. In 2016, it will be the 100th anniversary of the National Park System. So it's the kind of planning we can start now to show people that we can work together to capitalize